The Velthari Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered 3,000 worlds. Their ships were so many that when they gathered, they blocked out the light of stars. No species had ever said no to them. No species had ever survived trying. Commander Kyle Patterson stood on the bridge of his ship, the TSS Defiance. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too much. Around him, his crew worked at their stations. They were quiet. They had all seen the sensor readings. Lieutenant Amy Dawson sat at the tactical console. Her fingers moved across the controls as she counted the enemy ships. She had been in the Navy for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like this. 400 capital ships, she said. Her voice did not shake, but Patterson could hear the fear underneath. Each one is bigger than anything we have. This is the largest fleet ever recorded in Terran space. Patterson nodded slowly. He walked to the main window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, hidden by the vast distance of space, the Velthari Armada was coming. They moved like a wave that had never been stopped. 3 days ago, the Velthari had sent a message to Earth. It was not a request. It was not a negotiation. It was a command. Surrender. Join the Empire. Become subjects. Give up your freedom, your government, your way of life. Do this, or be destroyed. Every species the Velthari had encountered had received this same message. Every species had eventually said yes. Some fought for days. Some fought for weeks. The Kithrani, a proud warrior race, had fought for 3 months. In the end, their homeworld burned, and the survivors knelt before their new masters. Admiral Grace Morton had sent humanity's response. She was the commander of all Terran forces, a woman in her 60s with white hair and a spine of steel. She had looked at the Velthari demand and spoken a single word, no dot, just that. Nothing more. No explanation. No counteroffer. No attempt to negotiate. Just no. The Velthari had not known what to make of it. In 12,000 years, no one had ever said that word to them. They decided it must be a mistake. Perhaps the humans did not understand. Perhaps they needed to see the fleet to know what they faced. So the fleet came. Patterson turned away from the window. Open a channel to Luna Command. The face of General Nathan Cole appeared on the main screen. He was an older man with a shaved head and deep lines on his face. He had spent 40 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it was here. Commander Patterson, Cole said. What is your status? The Velthari fleet has entered our sensor range, sir. They are not slowing down. They are heading straight for the border. Cole nodded. This was expected. You are authorized to issue the formal warning. One time. Make it clear. Yes, sir. Patterson switched to the broad spectrum channel. This was a frequency that all ships could hear, including the Velthari. He took a deep breath. In a moment, he would speak words that would change everything. Attention, Velthari fleet. This is Commander Kyle Patterson of the Terran Space Navy. You are approaching sovereign Terran space. You are ordered to stop. If you cross our border, it will be considered an act of war. This is your only warning. He released the channel and waited. On the bridge, no one moved. Amy Dawson watched her sensors. The Velthari fleet appeared as a mass of red dots, moving steadily forward. She watched for any change, any sign that they were slowing. The dots kept moving. No response, she reported. They are maintaining course and speed. Patterson had expected this. The Velthari did not stop. They had never stopped. In their entire history, no one had made them stop. They did not believe anyone could. But humanity had not spent the last 2 centuries sitting idle. When humans first discovered faster than light travel, they found a galaxy already filled with great powers. The Velthari were the greatest of all. Humans were small, weak, primitive by comparison. They had barely left their own solar system. Smart leaders made a choice. Do not challenge the great powers. Do not draw attention. Expand quietly into the empty spaces between the stars. Build strength in secret. Prepare for the day when confrontation could not be avoided. That day had come. Across the sector, hidden in asteroid fields and behind moons and inside nebulae, 12,000 Terran ships waited. They were smaller than Valkyrie ships. They were fewer in number, but they had been designed with one purpose in mind: to fight an enemy that could not be beaten in a straight battle. Patterson opened a channel to his crew. All hands, this is the commander. The Valkyrie have crossed our border. We are now at war. He paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of his people. They were scared. They had every right to be. But underneath the fear, he saw something else: determination, anger, the stubborn human refusal to accept the unacceptable. I will not lie to you, Patterson continued. The enemy is stronger than us. They have more ships, bigger guns, thousands of years of experience. By every measure, we should lose this war. He smiled slightly. But we are not fighting by their measures. We are fighting by ours. And by our measure, there is only one thing that matters. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. We do not give up what makes us human. He straightened his shoulders. The Valkyrie have never faced an enemy like us. They have conquered species that knew how to give up. We are a species that forgot how. Our ancestors fought each other for 10,000 years over patches of dirt and lines on maps. They never stopped fighting, even when it made no sense, even when they should have. Patterson looked out at the stars one more time. That stubbornness is our inheritance. Today, we turn it against a common enemy. Today, we show the galaxy what free people can do. He closed the channel and turned to Amy Dawson. Lieutenant, signal the fleet. Operation Threshold is now active. Dawson's fingers flew across her console. Across the sector, hidden ships began to move. The trap that humanity had spent 200 years building was about to be sprung. The Valkyrie fleet crossed the border. They expected surrender. They expected fear. They expected to crush these primitive humans in a matter of days. They were wrong. Admiral Grace Morton stood in the command center of the TSS Constellation, humanity's mobile headquarters. The ship was hidden deep inside a nebula, its location known only to a handful of people. If it was destroyed, the war would continue. But Morton preferred to stay alive. She was 63 years old. Her hair had turned white 10 years ago, during the Proxima crisis, when a mining dispute nearly started a civil war between Earth and the colonies. She had ended that crisis with patience and careful words. This crisis would require different tools. Captain Daniel Perry stood beside her, studying the tactical display. He was 30 years younger than Morton, a brilliant officer who had risen quickly through the ranks. He had never seen real combat. None of them had. Humanity had avoided major wars for over a century. They crossed the border 6 hours ago, Perry reported. Our forward observers are tracking their movement. They have not changed formation. Morton nodded. The Valkyrie were confident. Why would they not be? They had done this thousands of times before. Move in with overwhelming force. Crush any resistance. Accept the surrender. Move on to the next target. She pulled up historical files on the main display. These were intelligence reports that humanity had gathered over 2 centuries, carefully collected from traders, refugees, and stolen data. The story they told was always the same. The Meridian Collective had been a peaceful civilization of artists and philosophers. They had believed that reason could solve any conflict. The Valkyrie conquered them in 6 days. Their great libraries were burned. Their people were scattered across the empire as servants. The HFY Federation had been builders and engineers. They had constructed wonderful machines and magnificent cities. They held out for 2 weeks before their leaders surrendered to save what remained. Now they built machines for the Velthari instead of themselves. The Kethrani had been warriors. They had fought with everything they had, every ship, every soldier, every weapon. They lasted 3 months. When it was over, their homeworld was a burned rock, and their surviving population was less than 1/10 of what it had been. Morton closed the files. "The pattern is always the same," she said quietly. "Resistance delays the inevitable, but does not change it. Every species that fights eventually loses. Every species that surrenders is absorbed." Perry looked at her. "Then why are we fighting?" "Because we are different." She turned to face him fully. "The Velthari conquer by breaking the will to fight. The Velthari conquer by breaking the will to fight. They use overwhelming force to create despair. Once a species believes it cannot win, it stops trying. That is the moment of true defeat." Morton walked to the window that looked out into the swirling gases of the nebula. "Humans have a quality that the Velthari do not understand. We have fought each other for our entire history. We have experienced conquest and occupation many times. And we have learned something important." She turned back to Perry. "Occupation is not permanent. Empires fall. The people who resist, who remember who they are, who refuse to become what the conqueror wants, those people eventually win. It may take generations. It may take centuries. But they win." An alarm sounded on the tactical display. Lieutenant Commander Beth Crawford looked up from her station. "Admiral, we are receiving reports from the border colonies. The Velthari fleet is approaching Kepler Station." Morton moved to the display. Kepler Station was a mining colony with 50,000 people. It was directly in the path of the Velthari advance. "Evacuation status? 42,000 civilians have been transported to safe zones. 8,000 remain, mostly essential personnel keeping the station running." Morton calculated quickly. "How long until the Velthari arrive?" 6 hours at current speed." "And how long to complete evacuation?" Crawford checked her data. 10 hours minimum. "The transport ships are working at maximum capacity, but there are not enough of them." The math was simple and terrible. 4 hours short. 8,000 people would still be on that station when the Velthari arrived. Perry spoke what everyone was thinking. "We could order the station to surrender. The Velthari might spare the civilians." Morton shook her head. "The Velthari do not spare anyone. Intelligence reports are clear on this. Populations that resist are punished. Not just soldiers. Everyone. They make examples to discourage future resistance." She made her decision. "Contact Commander Patterson. His group is closest to Kepler Station. I want them to engage the Velthari fleet." Crawford looked uncertain. "Admiral, Patterson only has 12 ships. The Velthari have 400. I know. They cannot win that fight. They do not need to win. They need to delay. Every hour they buy is another 2,000 civilians reaching safety." Morton's voice was hard, but not cruel. "This is the reality of our situation. We cannot match the Velthari in strength. We can only make them pay for every step forward." She opened a channel to the scattered Terran fleet. Her face appeared on thousands of screens and ships hidden throughout the sector. "All commands. This is Admiral Morton. The Velthari have entered our space. In the coming days and weeks, they will advance toward our colonies and eventually toward Earth itself. We cannot stop them with force alone." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Our strategy is simple. We will not fight battles we cannot win. We will not protect territory that cannot be held. We will protect our people. Every civilian we save is a victory. Every hour we buy is a triumph. Morton looked directly into the camera. The Velthari believe we are like every other species they have conquered. They believe we will break. They are wrong. We are the children of a world that has known 10,000 years of war. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and countless conflicts. They never gave up. Neither will we. She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. Begin Operation Threshold, and pray that our people are as stubborn as I think they are. Across the sector, the Terran fleet began to move. The first battle of the war was about to begin. Supreme Commander Azieth stood on the bridge of the inevitable victory, the greatest warship in the Velthari fleet. He was tall even for his species, with gray skin and 4 eyes that could see in spectrums humans could not imagine. He had commanded fleets for 300 years. He had never lost a battle. Through the viewing port, he could see the formation of his armada. 400 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Behind them came the support vessels, the troop transports, the supply ships. It was the largest force the Velthari had assembled in a century, and ahead of them, blocking the path to the human colony, were 12 small ships. Azieth's second-in-command, a female named Valith, studied the sensor readings with confusion. Supreme Commander, they cannot be serious. 12 ships against 400? This is not a battle. This is not even a delay. What do they hope to accomplish? Azieth considered the question. He had read the reports on humanity. A young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. Primitive technology, limited resources, small population. They should have surrendered immediately upon receiving the Empire's demand. Instead, they had said no. Perhaps it is a gesture, as it said. A show of defiance before the inevitable surrender. Many species have done this. They sacrifice a few ships to preserve their honor, then accept reality. He waved a hand dismissively. Destroy them and continue the advance. I want to reach the colony within the hour. The inevitable victory powered its main weapon. It was a plasma beam generator that had been refined over thousands of years. The energy it produced could cut through any shield, melt any armor, destroy any ship ever built. Targeting systems locked onto the lead human vessel. The weapon fired. On the TSS Defiance, Commander Patterson watched the energy build up on his sensors. He had trained for this moment for 20 years. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night had been preparation for what was about to happen. Halt. Execute Maneuver Delta 7, he ordered calmly. Ensign Kelly Barnes was young, only 24 years old. Her hands were steady on the controls. She had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times in simulation. Now she did it for real. The Defiance dropped suddenly, then rolled to starboard while simultaneously accelerating. The plasma beam passed through the space where the ship had been a fraction of a second earlier. The outer hull glowed from the heat of the near miss, but the ship was intact. On the inevitable victory, there was silence. Valith checked her sensors twice, then a third time. The human ship evaded the shot. Azieth stared at the display. That is not possible. No ship can move that quickly. The sensors are accurate, Supreme Commander. The human vessel anticipated our firing pattern and moved before the beam reached it. This had never happened. The Velthari targeting systems were the most advanced in the galaxy. They could track any movement, predict any maneuver. No species had ever dodged a direct shot from a Velthari capital ship. Patterson did not give them time to recover. All weapons, target their forward shield emitter. Fire on my mark. Lieutenant Amy Dawson had spent years studying captured Velthari technology. She had found something interesting. The Velthari shields were powerful but not perfect. They cycled through refresh patterns, and for a tiny fraction of a second during each cycle, there was a weakness. Shields cycle in 3, 2, 1 mark. The Defiance fired everything it had. The weapons were small compared to Veltari guns, barely enough to scratch the paint on a capital ship. But they were not aimed at the hull. They were aimed at a specific point on the shield emitter, at the exact moment when that point was vulnerable. The shots hit. A missile slipped through the momentary gap and detonated against the hull of the inevitable Victory. Alarms sounded across the Veltari bridge. Damage reports flooded in. The harm was minor, a small breach in a secondary section, easily contained. But it was damage. The greatest warship in the fleet had been hurt by a single human vessel. Azeth could not believe what he was seeing. How did they know where to strike? No one had an answer. Across the battlefield, the other 11 human ships engaged. Each one moved with the same impossible speed, the same precise targeting, the same ability to find weaknesses that should not exist. They danced through Veltari fire like they could see the future. The battle lasted 6 hours at the end. All 12 human ships withdrew. They were damaged, some badly, but none were destroyed. They had bought the time they needed on Kepler Station. The last transport lifted off with 3,000 civilians aboard. The station was empty when the Veltari finally arrived. There was nothing to conquer except empty corridors and abandoned equipment. Supreme Commander. Azeth stood in the ruins and felt something he had not felt in 300 years of command. He sent a message to the Veltari homeworld, requesting reinforcements. In 12,000 years, no commander had ever made such a request. Reinforcements were for armies that were struggling. The Veltari did not struggle. When the message reached the Imperial Court, it caused a sensation. The humans, these primitive newcomers, had done what no other species had accomplished. They had made the Veltari ask for help. Across the galaxy, other species heard whispers of this news. Conquered peoples, species that had knelt before the Empire for thousands of years, began to wonder. If the humans could fight back, if the Veltari could be hurt, perhaps other things were possible too. The first crack had appeared in an empire that had seemed eternal. And on the bridge of the TSS Defiance. Commander Patterson allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had not won. They could not win, not yet. But they had proven something important, that the Veltari could be hurt. And anything that could be hurt could eventually be beaten. The war had truly begun. 1 month had passed since the first battle. The Veltari had advanced steadily into human space, conquering 3 colony worlds. But the cost had been higher than anything they had experienced in living. Memory. General Nathan Cole stood before the Terran assembly on Luna. The great chamber was filled with representatives from every nation on Earth and every colony in the outer systems. They had come to hear the truth about the war, no matter how hard that truth might be. "We have lost 3 worlds," Cole said. His voice was steady, but the weight of those words hung heavy in the air. New Geneva, Prosperity Station, and the Kepler mining outposts. Combined population before evacuation, 12 million. A murmur ran through the assembly. Senator Lisa Grant from the Pacific Federation raised her hand. "General, how many of those 12 million were evacuated successfully?" 11,200,000. The murmur changed to surprised relief. Grant continued. "And the Veltari losses?" Cole pulled up a display showing damaged and destroyed enemy vessels. 32 capital ships destroyed. Another 47 damaged severely enough to require withdrawal for repairs. "We estimate Veltari casualties at approximately 200,000. The assembly fell silent. This was unheard of. No species had ever inflicted such losses on the Veltari in such a short time. How is this possible? Asked Representative Marcus Webb from the European Union. They outnumber us dramatically. Their technology is supposed to be far superior to ours. Cole nodded slowly. Their technology is superior in many ways. Their ships are larger, their weapons more powerful, their shields stronger. In a direct confrontation, they would destroy us. He changed the display to show a map of human space. But we are not fighting a direct confrontation. We are fighting a different kind of war. The map showed Velthari territory in red and human space in blue. But scattered throughout both regions were tiny green dots. For 200 years, we have been preparing for this moment, Cole explained. We knew that someday a great power would come for us. We could not match them in strength, so we developed a different approach. We call it the Doctrine of Defiance. He pointed to the green dots. These are hidden supply caches, hidden bases, hidden weapons platforms. They are scattered throughout space, in places the Velthari would never think to look. Asteroid fields, dead moons, the dark spaces between stars. When the Velthari advance, they think they are moving through empty territory. They are actually moving through a trap that stretches across light years. Senator Grant leaned forward. But what is the end goal? We cannot hide forever. Eventually, they will find our bases, our caches, our people. The goal is not to hide forever, Cole replied. The goal is to change the equation. Right now, the Velthari are expending massive resources to conquer our space. Ships, fuel, soldiers, time. All of these things cost them something, and they are not getting anything in return. He showed images of the abandoned colonies. When they reach our worlds, they find empty cities. Our people are gone. Our valuable technology is gone. There is nothing to loot, no population to enslave, no resources to extract. The Velthari are paying a high price for empty real estate. In the back of the chamber, a young man named Chris Lopez listened carefully. He was an aide to Senator Grant, born on Mars to parents who had fled Earth during the climate crisis. He had grown up hearing stories about human resilience, about the long struggles his ancestors had survived. Now he was watching that. Resilience in action. Cole continued his briefing. At the same time, our forces are striking at their supply lines. The Velthari stretched across thousands of light years. Their empire is held together by a constant flow of ships, resources, and information. We have been interrupting that flow. The display showed a dozen locations where human ships had attacked Velthari convoys. The raids were small, pinprick strikes that destroyed a few ships before vanishing into the darkness. But multiplied across the entire front, they were having an effect. The Velthari have been forced to divert ships from the main fleet to protect their supply routes, Cole said. Their advance has slowed. More importantly, word of their difficulties is spreading to other parts of their empire. He pulled up intelligence reports from Velthari subject worlds. 3 species have begun resistance movements in the past month. The Ashori are sabotaging their factories. The Meridian survivors are organizing underground networks. Even the Kethrani, who we thought were completely broken, have started fighting again. The assembly stirred with hope. This was better news than anyone had expected, but Senator Grant was not satisfied. General, this is encouraging. But what is our path to victory? We cannot fight forever. Our resources are limited. Our population is a fraction of theirs. How does this end? Cole was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was honest. I do not know if we can win in the traditional sense. The Velthari are too powerful for us to defeat militarily. But victory does not always mean conquest. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the representatives. What we can do is make this war too expensive for them to continue. What we can do is survive long enough for their empire to crack under its own weight. What we can do is show every conquered species in the galaxy that resistance is possible. He straightened his shoulders. The Velthari have ruled for 12,000 years. They believe their empire is eternal. But nothing is eternal. Every empire falls eventually. Our job is to be the weight that tips the balance. Chris Lopez felt a chill run down his spine. He understood now what the general was saying. This was not a war for territory. This was not even a war for survival. Not really. This was a war for an idea, the idea that free people could stand against tyranny, no matter how powerful. The idea that the will to resist could outlast the will to conquer. It was a dangerous idea. It was an expensive idea. Many people would die for it, but it was an idea worth fighting for. The assembly voted unanimously to continue the war. There would be no surrender. There would be no negotiation. Humanity would fight until it won or until it was destroyed. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Chris Lopez made a decision. He would not stay safe on Luna while others fought. He would join the resistance, whatever form that took. He was human. Fighting was what his species did best. 3 months had passed since the war began. The Velthari had advanced 40 light-years into human space. They had conquered 6 colony worlds and destroyed 2 Terran battle groups. Over 2 million human soldiers and civilians had died, but the cost to the Velthari was beyond anything they had ever experienced. Supreme Commander Azith stood before the High Council on the Velthari homeworld. The chamber was ancient, built when humans were still living in caves. For 12,000 years, military commanders had come here to report victories. Azeth was the first to report something else. The first speaker sat on her throne of carved crystal. She was old, even by Velthari standards, and her 4 eyes held the weight of centuries. Around her sat the other council members, the rulers of an empire that spanned the galaxy. "Explain," she commanded. Azeth had prepared his words carefully. "The campaign against humanity has not proceeded as expected. We have made territorial gains, but the cost has been significant." "How significant?" 68 capital ships destroyed. Another 112 damaged beyond immediate repair. 300,000 casualties among our forces. A ripple of shock passed through the council. These numbers were unprecedented. The conquest of the Kathrani, the most violent campaign in recent memory, had cost fewer ships. And what have we gained? Asked one of the council members. Azeth hesitated. 6 colony worlds. "Empty colony worlds," the first speaker corrected. Her voice was cold. "Our intelligence reports that the humans evacuated their populations before our arrival. We have conquered empty buildings and abandoned machines." "That is correct. So we have spent the equivalent of a major conquest and gained nothing of value." The first speaker leaned forward. "Commander Azeth, I have read your previous reports. You described the humans as primitive, barely capable of interstellar travel. You predicted the campaign would last no more than 30 days. I was wrong." The admission hung in the air. Velthari commanders did not admit error. Error was weakness, and weakness was not tolerated. "Tell me about these humans," the first speaker said. "Tell me what you have learned." Azeth had thought about this question for many sleepless nights. They do not fight as other species fight. They do not try to hold territory. They do not try to win decisive battles. Instead, they fight to delay, to survive, to make us pay for every advancement. That is not a strategy for victory. No, first speaker. But it is a strategy for not losing. And they have been remarkably effective at it. He pulled up a tactical display showing the current situation. Our supply lines are constantly under attack. Small groups of human ships strike our convoys, destroy what they can, and disappear before we can respond. We have had to divert significant forces just to maintain the flow of resources, then divert more forces. We have. But the humans know our territory better than we expected. They have hidden bases throughout the sector, positions we have not been able to locate. When we concentrate our forces in one area, they strike in another. Another council member spoke up. "One of the conquered populations. Surely we can use human prisoners to locate these hidden bases." Azith shook his head. The humans we have captured refuse to cooperate. We have used traditional methods of interrogation. They die before they speak. This caused another stir among the council. Most conquered species broke quickly under Velthri interrogation. The information gained was often useful. There's something else, Azith continued. Something more concerning. Word of our difficulties has spread to other parts of the Empire. 3 subject species have begun active resistance movements. The Ashori are sabotaging factories. The Meridian survivors are hiding refugees. The Kethrani remnants have started attacking isolated outposts. The first speaker's expression grew darker. You are saying that this small, primitive species has inspired rebellion across the Empire? I am saying that our reputation for invincibility has been damaged. We have always ruled through the belief that resistance is futile. The humans have proven that resistance is possible. Other species are taking notice. Silence fell over the council chamber. For 12,000 years, the Velthri had maintained control through overwhelming force and absolute confidence. Now both were being questioned. Finally, the first speaker spoke. What do you recommend? Azith took a deep breath. He was about to say something that had not been said in the council chamber for 5,000 years. Negotiation. The word fell like a stone into still water. Council members shifted uncomfortably. The first speaker's eyes narrowed. Explain. The humans cannot defeat us militarily, but we cannot defeat them either. Not quickly. Not without costs that will weaken our empire for generations. This is a war without victory, only varying degrees of loss. He called up a projection showing human space and the territories beyond. If we continue this war, we will eventually conquer their worlds. But we will do so with a weakened fleet, extended supply lines, and growing rebellion among our subjects. We will win the battle, but lose the empire. And if we negotiate, we acknowledge their right to exist as an independent species. We establish a border and agree not to cross it. In exchange, they stop attacking our supply lines and stop encouraging resistance among our subjects. We have never negotiated with a species we intended to conquer. Now, first speaker. We have never needed to. The council debated for 7 hours. In the end, they reached a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. They would talk on the TSS constellation. Admiral Grace Morton received the Velthri communication with a calm expression that hid her exhaustion. 3 months of constant combat had taken their toll. She had lost friends, colleagues, entire crews. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Captain Daniel Perry stood beside her as she read the message. They want to negotiate. They actually want to negotiate. So it seems we won. Morton shook her head slowly. We did not win, Daniel. We survived. We proved that we could not be easily conquered. That is not the same as winning. She began composing her response, choosing each word with care. The Velthri are not surrendering. They are not giving up their empire. They are simply deciding that we are not worth the cost. That calculation can change at any time. So what happens now? Now we talk. We establish a border. We get them out of our space. And then we prepare. She looked at Perry with tired eyes. This is not peace. This is a pause. The Velthri will be back in 10 years or 50 years or 100. Our job is to be ready when they come. She finished the response and sent it to the Velthri fleet. The message was simple. It acknowledged the Velthri request for negotiation. It proposed a neutral location for talks. It outlined humanity's basic position: independence, sovereignty, the right to exist on their own terms. It ended with a single sentence that would be remembered for centuries. We do not seek dominion over others. We ask only to be left alone. This is not negotiable. Everything else can be discussed. 3 days later, Volturi and human ships met in empty space between the stars. For the first time, the two species spoke as equals. The negotiations were difficult, but they were real. 6 weeks later, a treaty was signed. The Volturi withdrew from human space. A border was established. The war was over. Admiral Morton stood on the bridge of the Constellation as the last Volturi ship disappeared into the distance. Around her, crew members celebrated quietly. They had survived. Captain Perry approached her. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" "Of course. When this all started, when the Volturi first approached our border, we told them to stop. Do you think they ever believed we could actually make them?" Morton smiled for the first time in months. "No, Daniel. They did not believe it. No one did, including many of us. That is what made the difference." She looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness that humanity had claimed as their own. "We told them to stop. And in the end, that is exactly what they did." The galaxy had changed. The Volturi still ruled their empire, but their reputation for invincibility was gone. Across 1,000 worlds, conquered species began to hope. If the humans could resist, perhaps others could too. And humanity. They had learned something about themselves. They were small, they were young, they were primitive by galactic standards. But they had something that could not be measured in ships or weapons or technology. They had the stubborn, foolish, magnificent refusal to accept the unacceptable. They had said no. And they had meant it. That was enough.